It's 4:12 p.m. Your calendar shows one more meeting, a quick grocery stop, and dinner by 7. The sky out the office window is warm and ordinary, streaked with traffic noise and birds that don't know about bills. Then your phone vibrates. The company is restructuring, therefore your role is gone effective today. Before your breath returns, a second notification blinks. The lab wants to discuss results. Your tongue turns to sand. A third call. The school needs you right now. The day that was supposed to coast toward sunset shreds into strips you can't hold. You don't even make it to the parking lot before the question sneaks in. If I lost everything by sunset, who would I be then? We want a world with receipts. Be good, therefore good returns. Don't cheat, therefore life won't cheat you. Give, therefore receive. It's tidy, it's reassuring, it's also fragile. Because some evenings arrive like thieves, markets dip, storms rise, someone else's brake lights don't light, or a rumor outruns your reputation. The math doesn't add up. When the equations break, your soul wants a defendant. God is easiest to subpoena. Explain this. Itemize it. Show your work. Long before your timeline and mine, a man named Job lived in a land called Uz. The text paints him with 4 brisk strokes, wholehearted, upright, God-revering, and the kind of man who steers clear of evil. He is not flashy. He is steady. He prays for his children after their feasts just in case joy made them careless. He double-checks his heart before he checks his herds. He is the person you call when the water heater explodes and your courage leaks with it. Therefore his life blooms, fields, employees, a bustling house. But the center of his prosperity is not stuff. It's a quiet, stubborn piety that doesn't need a stage. Here is the uncomfortable thing. Job's story starts with goodness because our instinct is to assume that goodness is a wall. If I stack enough bricks, decency, generosity, worship, then wind can howl and my home will stand. That's true, but not how we think. We think if I pay on time, the universe owes me. We confuse wisdom with karma. The book of Job exists in part to smash that vending machine. Job is presented as exactly the kind of person who should be safe under a fairness model. Therefore, when his safety evaporates, we are forced to ask a harder question then. What did he do? We are forced to ask, what is God doing when the righteous suffer? You and I carry scripts we don't examine until they fail. Bad things happen to bad people, therefore if something bad happens to me, I must be bad. Or God blesses his favorites, therefore if I'm not blessed, I must not be favored. Or the darkest one, God is random, therefore none of this means anything. These scripts seem sensible in the abstract. Under pressure they turn cruel. They produce friends who give speeches instead of hugs and hearts that cannot lament without self-indictment. Job's opening chapter will not let us use pain to prove guilt or use prosperity to prove innocence. That's not cynicism, it's wisdom. It's the book taking your face gently in its hands and saying, look closer. Let's set our promise early. We will walk this story with modern shoes and ancient soil underfoot. We will slow down where the ache is hottest and speed up where distance helps. We'll quote a little and paraphrase a lot because you don't need a seminary lexicon to hear God from a storm. We'll keep asking frame break questions. If the next 4 notifications undid your life, what words would you have left if your faith has only known? Sunshine, can it speak at dusk? By the end of this journey, you will not get a spreadsheet of reasons. You will get something better and harder, presence that can be trusted when reasons are silent. Job will teach us to practice worship that doesn't sound like a commercial jingle. He will teach us to protest despair without pretending we are okay. And when God finally answers, it will not be to defend a policy. It will be to widen the frame until our fear has somewhere larger to stand. Tonight's episode begins where yours might: a normal afternoon, a faithful person, a world that seems predictable. Therefore, the shock to come will measure not just Job's theology but ours. But before the whirlwind and the arguments and the ash heap, we have to see the man clearly, the habits no camera crew would film. The prayers no applause ever heard. Because the only fuel you carry into crisis is what you stored on ordinary mornings. Takeaway. When fairness fails, your expectations anchor in practiced faith, not in promised outcomes. Integrity formed in quiet days becomes oxygen when the air gets thin. Dawn in us doesn't shout, it exhales. The horizon bruises purple to peach. Goat bells clink. A cook fire coughs a first curl of smoke. Job rises before the house does. Therefore the day borrows his calm. He steps through a courtyard washed in dew checks. The gate latch nods to the shepherd boy yawning by a pen. He is wealthy, yes, fields laid out like green paragraphs, oxen steady as commas, servants who respect more than fear him. But watch closer. His hands learn the day by touch, a rope, a hinge, a child's blanket pulled up from the night chill. The camera could pan to herds and ledgers, but the story wants you to see this quiet choices layered into a life. There were feasts last week. Laughter lapped up against the walls. The grown children told stories. Someone exaggerated for comic effect. A sister rolled her eyes and laughed anyway. Joy is not suspicious to Job. It is welcomed, therefore he works to protect it. When the feast smoke becomes memory, he wakes early and intercedes, not a performance, not a show. He calls each child to mind and offers worship on their behalf, paraphrasing what our text records: if hearts ran careless in celebration, let heaven cover what joy forgot. He doesn't control them, he carries them. Prosperity tempts us to keep score. We start to think life is a spreadsheet: give here, get there, sow therefore reap, donate therefore never ruin. Job breaks that math. He is generous because he loves God, not because he found a lever. He is careful with the vulnerable because they are people, not points. He pays on time. He inspects scales. He looks a laborer in the eye and asks about home. All of this reads as boring on paper, but boring is the scaffolding of trust. You don't build a shelter in the storm, you live in one you built before clouds. Maybe your version looks like this. The alarm at 5:30 a.m. Therefore you pack lunches, you scan the bank app. You pray one simple sentence over every kid's head as you pass their door. You swap the nicer car when the neighbor's battery dies. You send the text, thinking of you today. You check the smoke alarm, you don't post it. You don't need applause to keep going. And yet, be honest, doesn't a part of you expect God to notice your consistency? The way a boss notices punctuality. If I'm faithful, shouldn't I be safe? Here is the hinge. Job's faithfulness is not a subscription plan with perks. It is a posture. Therefore, when we read that his life blooms, we are meant to admire the man, not idolize the math. He is upright in public and private. He fears God in the way sailors fear the sea, not cowering but clear-eyed reverence that creates skill. He avoids evil not because he's allergic to fun, but because he knows poison when he sees it. He is the priest of his home, not a tyrant of his home. His prayers are blankets, not ropes. Frame break. What would it look like to priest your home this week? If you don't have kids, whose names would you carry before God by choice? If you're single, what rhythms make your apartment a chapel instead of just a charging station? Now a warning, one Job knows, and we will learn. The human heart hears stories like his and starts bargaining. We turn testimonies into formulas. We start to whisper, so this is how to keep pain away. But that is not wisdom. That is insurance fraud dressed in church clothes. Job's goodness is real, therefore we can celebrate it. Job's goodness is not a force field, but a foundation. There's a difference. A force field says nothing can touch me. A foundation says anything can hit me, and I still know where to stand. We should also say something about his leadership. The world often mistakes noise for lead. Job leads differently. He notices, he anticipates, he blesses. When conflict flares, he will step toward it, not around it. When decisions come, he will choose integrity even when cheaper roads beckon. This, too, is priestly, to stand between chaos and the people you love. Not as a wall they never see, but as a window they can look through and find God's light. If you walk through his estate at noon, You might miss him entirely, not because he's aloof, but because he is woven into the ordinary. With the accountants, he asks better questions than profit. With the shepherds, he asks better questions than quantity. With his children, he asks better questions than success. He asks about truth and kindness and whether anyone was unseen today. Therefore, when catastrophe will one day hunt him, it will not find him hollow. He has been filling the inner rooms for years, and yet linger here. Job doesn't flaunt his rituals to force God's hand. He knows what you and I forget. Intercession is not manipulation. It's participation. It is not telling God what to do. It is standing with God in what he loves. It is leadership at its most untelevised. When a father or mother, a friend or neighbor goes to God with another's name, the world shifts a millimeter in the right direction and nobody edits a montage. Would you be content to live that way if no one ever knew? Would you keep doing good if the weather ignored it? This is where Job stares us down gently. Because what comes next will not be fair by our math. The storm will test whether our worship has a receipt stapled to it. Job's does not. That is why the story starts at dawn with quiet greatness, so that when the sun drops like a stone, we'll understand the kind of fuel already stacked for the night. So, this takeaway. Practice priesting your world, carry names, keep honest scales, love without levers. The quiet faith you build at dawn is the only strength you'll own at dusk. Some scenes are truer than cameras can catch. The text lifts us above us to a chamber without marble or microphones, a council where beings report like lightning returns to thunder. It looks nothing like our courts yet. The logic is familiar, presence questions evaluation. The sovereign asks what he already knows, therefore every answer exposes the speaker more than it informs the king. Among the attendants glides an old adversary, no horns, just a vocation to accuse. He patrols the earth cataloging motives in mud, then files stories with a smirk. His thesis is simple, and sour people don't love God, they rent him. He gestures toward Job. Of course he reveres you. The argument runs. Look at the package deal, hedges, herds, healthy kids. A reputation that glows. Remove the perks and the piety will evaporate. Or in the famous needle of a line. Does he fear God for nothing? The claim is not that Job is a hypocrite in public. It is that Job's worship is transactional in private. Therefore, the contest proposed is not about livestock or weather. It's about love. Is there such a thing as reverence free of kickbacks? Would someone still sing if the gifts vanished? Or do we all love the table and merely tolerate the host? You know this charge. You felt it sideways in human friendships. If I lost my status, would you still show up? If I couldn't pay, would you still sit beside me? Our culture trains us toward performance contracts disguised as relationships. Approval becomes a currency, belonging a subscription. The accuser believes heaven runs the same way. He is betting that Job's altar is a vending machine and God is the product. He is not just accusing Job, he is insulting God. If God's worth requires gifts to prop it up, then God's glory is as fragile as Job's bank account. The sovereign accepts the test, but with a line. Everything he has is in your hand. The permission implies only do not reach the man. The leash is long enough to reveal, not long enough to destroy. Boundaries hum around the challenge like electric fence lines in tall grass, real, invisible, decisive. God is not the author of evil. He is the author who sets margins evil cannot cross. Therefore, the coming losses, however violent, arrive inside sovereignty, not outside it. The accuser can shake, but he cannot write the ending. He can scorch fields, but not rewrite the story's theme. This matters because some of us stumble right here. We hear permission and picture a cosmic game as if Job were a pawn sacrificed for sport. That is not this story. The test will not manufacture what is false. It will reveal what is true. It will not turn love into fear. It will uncover whether love ever stood without scaffolding. The permission dignifies Job with the chance to prove that worship can be non-negotiable. It also dignifies God by proving that his worth is not a bundle of benefits. Love to be love must be capable of surviving the subtraction of gifts. Frame break. If the perks fell off, your faith answers applause. Outcomes, what would remain? Would you still pray if prayer didn't fix the spreadsheet? Would you still sing if healing was delayed? This is not a guilt trip. It's an invitation to ground your worship in someone bigger than your circumstances. When you worship God because he is God, therefore suffering can bruise you without stealing you. When you worship God for the package, but the package explodes, your devotion has nowhere to stand. Back in heaven's chamber, the gavel you can't see drops as thunder you can. The accuser leaves with limits in his teeth. That line will matter later when we meet creatures no harpoon can tame. For now it means the next scenes, however horrific, are not evidence of a universe off its hinges. They are evidence that a question is being answered in real time. Is there a human who will adore without a receipt, and the test is scheduled? The earth doesn't know yet. Uz is making lunch. The shepherds are counting. Somewhere a roof plank creaks with noon heat and nobody imagines wind. Therefore, when the messengers start running one, then another, then another, then another, we will not be watching random chaos. We will be watching a thesis collide with a life. If the accuser is right, worship will curdle as fast as milk in sun. If the sovereign is right about his servant and about his own worth, then grief will be real and faith will be realer. The camera will drop from clouds to dust, and we'll stand there with Job as the world he tended unravels faster than hands can catch. Hold this before we go. Limits exist. You may not see them, but they are set. Evil is loud, therefore we think it is free. It is not. Evil is fast, but it is leashed. Your story won't explain every why, and Job's won't either. It will give you something humbler and stronger, the courage to worship when proofs go dark, and the sanity to remember that your pain has borders. Takeaway. Anchor your worship in God's worth, not God's gifts. Tests do not create faith or love, they reveal the kind you already carry, and all of it unfolds inside God's limits. Uz at noon hums like a beehive, tools ringing, animals muttering, dust drawing halos around every moving thing. Job is midway through ordinary checks when a runner breaks the horizon, a single dark stitch ripping fast toward the house. He arrives gulping air that won't stay, words tumbling over each other, the way feet did raiders' Sabians. Oxen driven off, donkeys taken, blades flashing, servants cut down. I alone escaped to tell you. Therefore the day tilts. Accounts must be tallied, families must be told, funeral linen needs finding. Job's mouth opens for orders he has given 100 calmer times, but the words never leave. A second runner is already in the doorway, as if the road itself were producing messengers. His face is scorched with panic and heat. Fire fell from the skies, he says, lightning baptized as judgment by terrified eyes. The sheep are gone, the servants ashes. Therefore the arithmetic shifts from solvable to surreal. Lightning doesn't consult insurance. Fire does not write apology notes. Job doesn't theologize. His jaw hardens. His eyes sweep instinctively toward the far pasture, as if looking might unburn a field. They hear the third before they see him, a cough of dust, the wobble of exhausted knees. Chaldeans this time, 3 bands coordinated like wolves watching each other's eyes. Camels seized, men cut down, I alone escaped. Therefore the fortune that took decades to steward dissolves in the space between 2 breaths. But money can be rebuilt. Job's thoughts try to say, bodies can't, families ache. He swallows hard against the taste of iron rising in his mouth. He looks toward the house where laughter has a favorite corner and a favorite echo. The fourth messenger looks wrong before he speaks. There's a quiet around him that is louder than any scream. He doesn't collapse. It's like his legs made a pact not to waste energy now. He lifts his eyes once, and Job knows. A wind, he says. From the wilderness. The kind that snaps trees at the waist, therefore tents and roofs don't matter. It struck the four corners of the oldest brother's house. The party ended under the weight of beams. The laughter didn't have time to turn into a warning. Your sons, your daughters, the sentence splinters. I alone, sound leaves the world. Job's hands move before his mind does. Robe torn, head shaved, an ancient grammar of grief that says something has ended that I cannot name. He drops to the ground, not because he is weak, but because standing feels like lying now. Dust powders his forehead. People will tell this story and argue theology for centuries. The text will record a sentence that sounds impossible outside of poetry naked. I came naked, I will return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name. He does not deny the deaths. He refuses to deny the giver. Therefore, worship becomes protest not against God, but against despair's claim on the last word. Let the camera stay here. Don't hurry him to a sermon. His chest shakes. Sand sticks to tears. His mouth forms blessing like a man learning speech again. The book will add this line like a small, fierce candle in all this. Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. That doesn't mean he smiled or shrugged. It means he would not convert pain into an accusation against the only one who could hold him together. He does not explain the lightning. He does not call the wind good. He does something braver. He tells the truth about loss and then tells the truth about God in the same breath. We have to talk about shock because that is where many of us either implode or perform. Shock wants to numb, therefore your brain bargains. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe the text was a prank. Maybe she'll walk in laughing and say, "Got you." But the stretcher is heavy. The voicemail is verified. The second doctor's opinion is the same opinion. Therefore, the bargain dies. Another temptation rises to speak for God with too much confidence, or to speak against him with too much fury. Job does neither. He speaks to God from inside the crater. He trusts the only one big enough to hear a sound this size. Modern version 3 buzzes and a siren. The bank freezes your account because a fraudster guessed your life. The HR call says your badge won't beep anymore. The scan lights up places no light should be, and then your teenager calls from a friend's phone. There was a wreck. Everyone is okay, which is the word people say when they are trying to outpace panic. You reach the intersection with the longest light in town and time puts its foot on your neck. Who are you when the props fall? What sentence would you rather die than surrender? Job's sentence is not a spell, it's a submission. It is a hand opening when the fingers want to calcify. God is not being paid a compliment. He is being recognized. He is the giver before he is the taker, and he is the blessed one whether hands are full or empty. Therefore the ash heap becomes an altar without marble or choir. The torn robe becomes liturgy without lyric. Every angel in the unseen room stops moving to hear whether worship is possible after this. It is, not pretty, not on pitch, but possible. One more thing, grief moves like waves, which means this scene is not the end of composure forever, or the creation of a perfect saint. Later Job will argue hard. He will lament raw. He will wish he had never been born. None of that cancels this moment. This moment anchors those later storms. Sometimes you get only one clear sentence on the worst day of your life, and it keeps the rest of your days from going dark. Write yours now while the sky is still blue. Unequal way. Train one true sentence for the day of messengers worship as defiance of despair. Grief can be honest and God still worthy in the same breath. The council scene returns like a thunderhead that didn't finish speaking. The accuser shrugs as if the first storm proved nothing. Skin for skin, strip away health and you'll hear a man's true creed. The sovereign permits a deeper cut. Therefore the line moves closer, you may strike his body but spare his life. And somewhere in us sleep turns to pain without a transition. Boils bloom like burning stars from scalp to soles. Every seam of skin is a fault line. He cannot sit without hurting. He cannot stand without dizziness. He cannot lie down without fire under his breath. He chooses the dump outside the city because grief needs a place where nobody flinches. Ash heaps smoke, stray dogs argue, and shards of yesterday's jars glitter like broken moons. Job lowers himself to the ground and finds a pottery fragment with one clean edge. Therefore begins the liturgy of scraping slow strokes to quiet the itch that is not an itch, but a blaze. Dust coats his tongue. He measures the day by how long the sun takes to cross his forearm. Neighbors pause on the path wanting to help but afraid to touch the ruins grief has made. Pain colonizes everything. Food turns hostile. Sleep refuses treaties. The once commanding man must negotiate with his own hands to do what toddlers do without thinking. He is not pretending he's okay. He is guarding something he refuses to surrender. Integrity, not perfection posture. He has not built a force field, he is clinging to a foundation. Meanwhile, another sufferer enters the frame, his wife, 10 fresh graves behind her. The house still smelling like absence. People roast her infamous line as if she said it to win an argument. She says it because despair has stripped her vocabulary. She wants the pain to stop, therefore she reaches for the loudest lever she can imagine, abandon the God who allowed this and let the story end. Job answers with words that have been polished by ache. He does not call evil good. He does not call God cruel. He refuses both blasphemy and pretense. In essence, he replies, "We received good from God with open hands. Shall we not stand under hard weather without indicting the sky?" Therefore he keeps his lips from sin not by silence, but by honesty that will not sign false statements about God. This is not stoicism. This is reverent defiance of despair. The ash heap becomes a chapel again, without marble or hymn, only dust and breath. Limits still hold, his life is spared. Mercy exists even in triage. Let's dignify the wife a moment longer. She too worshipped at those family feasts. She too buried children whose laughter still echoes in hallways. Trauma compresses compassion into impatience. When bodies break, marriages often misfire. One wants quiet, the other wants answers. One wants God confronted, the other wants God held. Therefore conflict sparks on top of grief like lightning on dry grass. Job doesn't shame her. He calls her words foolish, not her. He refuses to let a moment of exhaustion become the story they both believe. Modern parallel chronic illness turns the map of your body into disputed territory. Friends mean well, therefore they send articles and smoothies. Some prayers feel like pressure to perform. You can't plan next month because you can't predict next hour. Paperwork multiplies. Pharmacies miscount. You learn the names of receptionists by their voices. The story does not cancel your ache with quick miracles. It honors the ache by telling you there is a way to hurt, without hating the one who holds you. Limits still hold, your life is spared this hour. Mercy can thread even the waiting room. And help is already on the road. 3 friends have heard and are coming for better and for worse. The Spirit translates. Therefore do not despise the small liturgies of endurance, the shower you manage every 3rd day, the walk to the mailbox, the gratitude for 10 quiet minutes when the pain decides to blink. None of it is wasted. You are not failing God by being finite. You are meeting Him where He has already promised to be. One more frame break before the friends arrive. Where are you tempted to trade integrity for explanation, to say untrue things about God to make a spreadsheet balance? to say untrue things about your pain to keep the room comfortable. Choose neither. Choose to be faithful and frank at the same time. That choice won't heal sores, but it will keep your soul from infection. Therefore, when counsel comes good, bad mixed, you'll have a center that can listen without surrendering what God already told you in the dark. Takeaway. When pain shrinks your world, choose integrity over explanation. Refuse both denial and blasphemy. Tell the truth about hurt and the truth about God, and let that be worship. Word of Job's ruin moves faster than caravans. 3 friends, men with mileage on their sandals and miles in their eyes, hear and start walking. They don't wait for a convenient week. They set their faces toward us, because friendship isn't a calendar, it's a compass. Therefore the road gathers them the way grief gathers people who once shared bread. When they finally see him, skin-cratered clothes torn, a man sitting in ash with a shard for a tool, they do not recognize the friend they loved. Recognition arrives as a wound, therefore they let their bodies speak before their mouths do. Robes ripped, dust flung, tears unhidden. They sit on the ground with him. Not a stool, not a chair, the ground. 7 days, 7 nights, no speeches, no verses as band-aids, no at least sentences to shrink a canyon into a crack. They saw that his pain was very great, therefore they refused to compete with it. Silence becomes the only sentence big enough for the crater. Their presence does what explanations cannot. It shares the weight so the man can keep breathing. This is the best thing they will do in the entire story, and it happens with their mouths cleaved. Silence is not avoidance here. It is honor. When grief is fresh, language is too sharp, like handing a newborn a knife. The friends let the first storm spend itself without trying to steer it away. They keep watch the way you keep watch in a hospital hallway at 3 a.m., counting the beeps, listening for the nurse's shoes, praying without threading words. Therefore, the ash heap becomes a chapel with 4 congregants and no sermon. There is nothing efficient about it, that is why it works. Modern picture your friend's living room smells like casseroles and lilies. You arrive without a plan beyond staying. You switch your phone off. You put the kettle on. You fold the blanket that keeps getting kicked to the floor. If someone asks what they should do next, you say, "Not today." When the doorbell rings, you screen the visitors the way bouncers protect a fragile club. You do not offer timelines. You resist the urge to explain tragedy with a diagram or reassure with a slogan. Therefore, your presence tells the truth. Love is here and love is not in a hurry. Frame break. Who needs you to sit on the ground for a while, not fix? Sit. Who do you need to let in even if your ash heap feels too messy for company? Some of us learn to protect others from our pain. But protecting people from love is another name for loneliness. Let one safe person see the ash. If you are the friend, choose one simple liturgy: soup, a short walk, a grocery run, a sink of dishes, a quiet car ride. Presence over performance. That's the lesson the friends teach before they forget it. Silence also gives the sufferer permission to speak first. Order matters. If the brokenhearted opens the gate, words can be honest without being hijacked. If the friends speak first, grief often becomes a debate. Therefore, a week of waiting is not wasted time. It is trust. They are saying with bodies, "We will sit at the pace of your pain." They are saying with tear-wet faces, "We are here to hear." The human nervous system reads that message more deeply than any paragraph. Safety is a presence, not a proposition. Let's underline what they did not do. They did not run an audit of Job's past to find leverage against the present. They did not say, "Everything happens for a reason," because the sentence, even if true, arrives like a lid on a boiling pot. They did not weaponize hope to silence sorrow. They did not curate a memory reel to distract from the moment. They did not shrink God to a slogan or inflate themselves to saviors. Therefore, their company becomes oxygen. Job is not alone in the ash. He is accompanied. Sometimes that is the miracle, not that pain disappears, but that it is shared. Of course, a week is long and humans are restless. The same compassion that sits can start to itch. Explanations masquerade as comfort. The urge to help becomes the hunger to fix. But let's give them their flowers for the part they get right. Grief requires witnesses. Witnesses require patience. Patience trains the tongue. It does not amputate it, but it tames it. When Job finally speaks, when he curses the day of his birth, instead of cursing God, he will be answering an environment the friends created, one where raw truth can surface without being swatted down. Practical moves for your next ash heap visit arrive. Without questions that start with why. Offer specifics, not let me know if you need anything. Bring disposable plates. Take trash out. Send 3-line texts that demand nothing back. Sit near enough to be felt, far enough to be breathable. Set your phone face down. If scripture rises to your lips, let it be a whisper of solidarity, not a gavel. If silence stretches, do not panic. Stretch with it. Therefore, your friend's nervous system can stop bracing for impact and start resting. Soon, these same friends will trade presents for platitudes. They will build a courtroom out of good intentions and tidy formulas. We will analyze that failure next. For now, learn the skill they briefly master: shared silence as holy work. In a noisy world that confuses volume with care, you can be the quiet that heals. Takeaway: show up, sit low. Stay soft, say little presence before answers. In the first shock of grief, silence offered in love is better than any speech offered in fear. 7 days is a long time to hold your breath. On the 8th, Job inhales and breaks the silence, not with a doctrine, but a howl. He doesn't curse God. He curses his birthday. He wants the calendar revised so the square with his name goes black. Let darkness claim it, he says in essence. He asks night to eat that dawn. He begs the womb to give him back. Therefore, the first thing suffering teaches is a grammar most churches never practice: lament. It is not rebellion. It is relationship that refuses to go mute. Why curse a day? Because grief needs a target that won't bleed. Job will not slander the character of God, but he will map the crater honestly. He asks why light is given to those who only meet it with groans. He confesses that he feared this kind of collapse long before it arrived. Anxiety didn't lie to him. It rehearsed him. He is not tidy, he is true. If you have ever stared at a ceiling and wished you could unbe, you are not disqualified from faith. You are speaking Job's language. Eliphaz goes first among the friends, gentle voice, elder tone. The kind of counselor you'd trust with the keys. He reminds Job you used to strengthen others. Therefore, be strengthened now. He adds a midnight story, a shiver of a vision, a whisper that no human is more righteous than God. Hard to argue. Then the turn you reap what you sow. In his system, lions who maul end up toothless. Sinners birth trouble like sparks flying up from a fire. Therefore, if calamity is here, some seed must have been planted. Repent and dawn will return. That math is comforting when you're safe. It gives us control. Sow good, reap good. Sow evil, reap evil. We put it on coffee mugs and call it wisdom. But the book of Job exists to expose what happens when karma language is used as a cudgel. Eliphaz's counsel is half true and therefore dangerous. Scripture will elsewhere celebrate sow-reap patterns, but wisdom literature also contains counter-proverbs because the world is not a vending machine. Rigid formulas collapse under innocent pain. Job pushes back. He doesn't claim sinlessness, he claims disproportion. His arrows are poison-tipped, his nights are measured by nightmares, his days by the distance to dusk. Modern translation: your friend's child is still missing after 3 days, do you say? What doors did you leave unlocked? A woman's biopsy is malignant, do you ask about her prayer life? A man loses work in a merger he didn't engineer, do you hint at secret laziness? We don't mean to accuse, we mean to preserve the illusion of control. If their suffering has a tidy cause, then ours can be avoided by avoiding their mistakes. Therefore, we grab any lever that promises immunity, better diets, stricter budgets, louder prayers. The heart motive isn't always cruel, it's afraid. Job asks for a different universe. One with scales accurate enough to weigh what sits on his chest. He longs for God, not a rumor of God, not a TED Talk about God, but a hearing. He wants the courtroom officially open, subpoenas served, the judge present. He imagines a mediator, someone who could put a hand on both shoulders and translate anguish into admissible speech. He isn't demanding a trophy, he is begging for a conversation. Therefore, his lament is faith at full volume. Unbelief ignores God. Lament drags God into the room and will not let him leave without blessing or at least breath. Eliphaz insists, I've seen. That's part of the trap experience compiled into a rule book. But suffering is not an algorithm. It's a storm with microclimates. Bildad and Zophar will take turns later with harsher versions of the same arithmetic. For now, the first cycle reveals the great pastoral error, treating proverbs as promises, promises as policies, and policies as pressure. Job refuses to sign. He won't lie about God to protect his friend's worldview, and he won't lie about his pain to protect the room's comfort. Frame break, what sentences do you reach for in a crisis that sound wise but shrink the sufferer? Everything happens for a reason. God won't give you more than you can handle. At least, try this instead. This is awful, and I'm here. Can I carry something today? Do you want me to pray or just sit? And for your own grief, what would it mean to talk to God like Job does? Raw, specific, reverent, and relentless holiness isn't a poker face. Holiness is refusing to accuse God falsely and refusing to pretend you're okay when you're not. We should also notice Job's lament doesn't end the debate. It escalates it. That's the risk of honesty. You might be misunderstood by people who love you. Therefore, anchor your speech in the God who sees, not the friends who score. You are allowed to curse a day and still bless the name. You are allowed to ask why without being assigned an usher to the exit. Lament is how faith breathes underwater. By dusk of cycle 1, we've learned 2 ways to drown. Deny pain to defend God, or deny God to defend pain. Job chooses neither. He keeps his integrity and his ache in the same mouth. He says, in effect, I can't solve this, but I will not rewrite God into a villain, and I will not rewrite my wounds into illusions. That is not weak faith. That is muscular faith, sore shaking, still gripping. Takeaway. Trade karma. Speak for covenant speech. Stop explaining pain to keep control. Start lamenting to keep connection. Talk to God honestly, refuse tidy blame, and let faithful grief be your protest against despair. Round 2 doesn't soften, it sharpens. Bildad and Zophar trade sympathy for certainty. The wicked spring like weeds, they argue in essence, therefore they wither by evening. If your world collapsed, that says enough. The logic is tidy, but cruelty hides in tidy places. They quote proverbs like subpoenas, stack examples like evidence, and aim all of it at Job's chest. Reputation turns courtroom. Once he was the man others rose for. Now even children smirk when he passes. Job answers without varnish. I know about God's power, he says in paraphrase. I can recite the same verses you can, therefore stop acting as if my pain proves my guilt. He cannot out-comment the rumor his friends prefer, he can only keep telling the truth. What does being misunderstood do to a soul? It doubles the weight injury outside, suspicion inside. Chapter 29 remembers the old days, lamps of favor. The poor blessed leaders silent when Job spoke. Chapter 30 bleeds the mockery, the night stretched thin. The body a drum skin tuned too tight. Friends keep firing theology. Job keeps asking for God, not a defense brief, the defendant. He wants a hearing, not a hashtag. He's not asking for exemption from suffering. He's asking for the presence that makes suffering bearable. Therefore, he refuses both flattery and self-hatred. He won't invent sins to satisfy formulas, and he won't pretend immunity to satisfy pride. Then comes the oath, chapter 31. A legal deposition turned into prayer. Job doesn't preen. He invites audit. I made a covenant with my eyes, he says. Not a boast, a boundary. He walks through his life department by department: desire, money, power, enemies, hospitality. If I've let lust set my root, therefore let judgment fall. If my hands skimmed wages, therefore let my fields grow for someone else. If I ignored the cry of the poor but feasted anyway, then let my own arm fall from its shoulder. If I put trust in gold, if I gloated at my enemy's bad day, if my door stayed shut to the traveler, then write it down against me. Integrity here is not I've done everything right. It is search me fully. He drags closets into daylight and hands God the key. This is the opposite of image management. In modern terms, audit. My books, check my browser. Call the widows, ask the farmhands, read my group chats, scroll my DMs, examine my tax returns, interview my competitors. He is not performing for the gallery, he's inviting the judge. Therefore, the oath becomes a shield not against suffering but against the cancer of duplicity. We keep waiting for a crack, but the testimony holds, not sinless yet not secretly scheming. Meanwhile, the friends grow harsher. Zophar paints a morality play where wicked joy is short-lived and vomit follows stolen bread. Bildad shrinks humanity to moths and maggots before sheer majesty. Job answers with a storm of doxology. You can almost hear chapter 26 thunder, yes. God is vast, he breathes frost. He wraps waters in thick clouds. The pillars of heaven tremble, therefore stop pretending that reciting power explains my pain. By the close of cycle 3, speeches sputter. Job signs his statement the way a witness signs the last page of sworn testimony. Here is my mark. He is not asking to be proven right over neighbors. He wants to be rightly related to God. He believes there is a Redeemer somewhere in the wings, someone who will vindicate life even if dust is all that's left of his body. He doesn't know the timetable. He knows the character of the one he wants to face. Therefore, he stays in the courtroom of the soul until the judge appears. Integrity for him is openness plus obedience, nothing hidden, nothing hoarded, nothing negotiated. When the whirlwind finally comes, it will not crush that honesty, it will crown it. Frame break for us. When accusations circle, what can you swear to with a clean mouth? Write your own chapter 31. Not for the internet, but for God. Name the places you are temptable, desire, money, attention, and set therefore clauses that tie you to truth. If I shade expenses, therefore I will call it theft and make restitution. If I savor my enemy's failure, therefore I will pray blessing by name. If I scroll where my eyes shouldn't live, therefore I will place real limits and invite real eyes to see. That isn't legalism, it's light. Your goal isn't to win a debate with friends, it's to stand in a storm with nothing to hide. When rumor hunts you, you cannot outpace it. You can only outlast it. Job does not fix his friends. He faces his God. Therefore he becomes free in a way the friends are not. They need the world to match their math. He needs the world's maker. In the end, the oath doesn't coerce heaven. It prepares earth, Job's inner earth, to receive whatever comes, as a man already searched and found in someone larger than himself. That is how you survive a courtroom you didn't ask to enter. You welcome the only judge who can turn trials into truth. Soon. Takeaway. Don't manage your image. Invite God's audit. Write your own chapter 31. Tie your temptations to concrete boundaries and live so you can pray. Search me and mean it when the courtroom forms around you. A younger voice waits until the elders run out of words. You can see him in the corner, fists opening and closing the way a paramedic paces while managers argue policy over a bleeding man. He's angry with the friends because they condemned without convincing. He's angry with Job because in his view pain has pushed Job's righteousness into self-defense. Therefore, Elihu steps forward, not timid, not cruel, determined to defend God's justice without turning God into a vending machine. He starts where we often should: humility. I'm young, he admits in essence, but breath is borrowed from the Almighty. Therefore, age is not the only credential. Inspiration is. Then he reframes. Maybe suffering is not courtroom evidence. Maybe it is classroom instruction. God speaks, he says, in whispers you sleep through, and in pain you cannot. Dreams warnings a messenger who translates the riddle of affliction. Therefore, wounds can be microphones if we refuse to let despair do the editing. Elihu won't call evil good, but he insists God can braid mercy through hard weather. This helps, doesn't it? If calamity is never random and never cruel in God's hands, then endurance becomes more than white-knuckling. Endurance becomes attention. Somewhere between Job's oath and the friend's formulas, Elihu carves a lane called teachability. He tells Job that God is not obligated to explain himself. Therefore, silence from heaven is not proof of indifference. He sketches a God who rescues the poor in their affliction and opens ears through oppression's pressure. It's a hard sentence to swallow, but for a listener desperate for meaning, it can be water. Modern picture: a good therapist re-narrates what your pain has been saying in a language your heart can finally hear. A mentor says, "Don't waste this darkness, inventory it." A podcast clarifies categories you didn't know existed: discipline that is not punishment, correction that is not contempt. Therefore, even a hospital room can become a classroom if you refuse to enroll in cynicism. Elihu doesn't hug like a mother. He tutors like a coach who believes there's still a game to play. Yet the limits show. Elihu defends God's justice so fiercely that he sometimes flattens Job's ache. He warns against charging God with wrong good, but he edges toward thinking that if we just listen harder, the lesson will make the pain make sense. Not always. Some lessons only come after the storm, and some never come with sentences we can print on a mug. Elihu's insight is real. His angle is partial. He is the last human word before the divine word, a lantern that helps your eyes dilate before sunrise. Watch how he becomes meteorologist and preacher at once. He points to thunderheads muscling the horizon, to lightning stitching the sky, to winds rehearsing the overture of a larger voice. Consider the wonders of God, he urges. Creation is not a backdrop. It is a syllabus. Therefore, step outside your pain-narrow frame and let big things resize you. Snow held in reservoirs, rain scheduled, light loosed from storehouses you cannot reach. Elihu's arm sweeps wide. The camera pulls back. Job's ash heap gets small against a world that is anything but random. Frame break. Where has pain made you myopic? Can you hold two truths at once: that God can teach in suffering and that God is not obligated to annotate every page? Would you let a partial insight carry you to the threshold of awe without demanding it be? The whole house. Sometimes the right humility is to say, "This helps, therefore I'll keep it, and this doesn't heal, but I'll hold it until the storm finishes the sentence." Elihu's last move is pastoral. He begs Job not to choose rebellion as relief. Don't prefer a world where God is absent just because a world with God includes mystery. He warns against the seductions of bitterness, the way grievance can become identity. Therefore, he says, remember to magnify his work, not because praising erases pain, but because praising prevents pain from becoming your whole map. He is not scolding, he's steering. He wants Job's honesty to stay honest without hardening into accusation. And then mid-sentence, almost, the weather answers him. Thunder interrupts like a judge entering a courtroom. Wind gathers in ranks, dust climbs, the sky lowers its brow. Elihu is not wrong. He is simply not enough. He's the last sign before the exit to somewhere larger. Therefore, do not despise partial light. It keeps you walking. But do not camp beneath it either. The sun is rising. Takeaway. Receive partial light without mistaking it for the sun. Let pain tutor your heart, stay teachable without demanding tidy reasons, and hold space for the God who is about to speak for himself. The air changes first. The way a room knows a door is opening before the hinge speaks, the horizon tightens, dust lifts, and thunder stacks its syllables. Job does not go looking for God. God comes looking for Job. Wind fists the sky into a single dark pupil. Then a voice rides the storm, not courtroom gavel, not lecture hall drone. Questions, not small ones. Not how are you feeling, but how wide is the frame you've been using. Therefore, the argument will not be settled by a footnote. It will be swallowed by a universe. Stand up, the storm implies an answer like a man. Where were you when the foundations were measured? Who drew shorelines like belt lines around the sea so the waves would roar and then retreat? Morning light, who flips that switch? Snow and rain, who keeps the keys to those storehouses? Lightning, who tells it where to land? The questions move like a camera crane yanking back from an ash heap to a planet rotating in black silk. Therefore, Job's pain isn't mocked, it's reframed. He is being invited to see that chaos is not king and mystery is not madness, it is majesty. The tour continues and it gets delightfully specific. The mountain goat gives birth on a ledge Job has never climbed. God watches the ankles and the timing. The wild donkey refuses harness and laughs at fences. It eats wind for breakfast. The ostrich mismanages her eggs but can sprint like a motorcycle in sand because God gave her a different gift. The warhorse snorts, paws, the valley smells battle from miles and flings its mane at thunder, courage bottled in muscle. Hawks ride thermals by wisdom that isn't yours. Eagles build on crags you can't reach and spot life far below with eyes that never needed your lens prescription. Therefore, the world is more than a moral exam. It is a living museum of trusts and limits and delights you didn't invent. What is God doing with this wildlife documentary? He is not changing the subject. He is changing the scale. Job's questions assumed a universe small enough to audit. God's questions reveal a universe large enough to trust. If someone can choreograph light leash oceans, time pregnancies on cliffs, wire joy into a horse, and give wings to harsh deserts with unplanned rain, then perhaps he can be wise toward your particular midnight without presenting the minutes to the court. Awe doesn't cancel grief. It puts grief somewhere it can breathe. Frame break. When was the last time you let wonder have your full attention? No phone, no agenda, just sky. Go outside at night and count until counting fails. Watch a storm form on a weather radar, then walk to a window and feel what the radar can't say. Step into a zoo and treat it like a cathedral. Therefore, do the thing Job is being moved to do. Let creation tutor your proportions. You are not trivial, but you are not the axis. That is good news. The world's weight does not rely on your explanations. It rests on a wisdom older than your wounds. We should underline mercy here. The questions sound fierce because love is fierce when pride is fatal. God does not give Job a spreadsheet. He gives himself voice, presence, power, harnessed to affection. If God only barked commands, Job would crater. Instead, the storm turns into a classroom where the teacher refuses multiple choice and insists on wonder. Therefore, Job is safe to stop arguing for a moment and start beholding. Beholding is not passivity. It is the most active thing a soul can do when answers won't fit the ache. By the end of this first round, nothing in Job's circumstances has changed. Skin still hurts, graves are still fresh, friends still fidget. But something in his posture has begun to move. The camera in his chest lifts off the ash and learns to pan again. The questions are not a trap, they are a hand on the back guiding his gaze above the horizon of his hurt. That is how the healing starts, not with explanations that make the math tidy, but with a presence that makes the world big enough for sorrow and trust to stand in the same frame. Takeaway. When answers won't come, pursue awe. Let God's world resize your pain. Wonder won't erase grief, but it will make room for trust to breathe again. The storm does not dim, it focuses. After constellations and snow vaults and war horses, the voice narrows to two living riddles, Behemoth and Leviathan. These are not pets for a king's garden tour. They are theater. Strength and chaos walk on stage so Job can see what his fear keeps inflating and what God keeps leashing. Therefore, the lesson will be less about biology and more about boundaries, less about species charts and more about sovereignty. Behemoth first. Picture rivergrass bending around a body that displaces water like a barge, thighs plaited like cables, a belly that laughs at famine, bones like bars of bronze, frame like a forge. He grazes like an ox, yet one swing could uproot a tamarisk grove. He is not wicked, he is weight. He drinks from the Jordan as if it were a ladle, but no shepherd dares tie a ribbon to his neck for parade. God points at this living mountain to say, I made him. I delight in his mass. I enjoy the thunder of his steps. Therefore, raw strength is not the enemy of heaven, pride is. Power exists, and it is beautiful when bounded by a better power. Why this creature? Because we build our safety on levers we can lift. The book asks us to look at a life that cannot be lifted. Your plans, your savings, your reputation, these are small ropes around large legs. We are not mocked for being small. We are invited to be sane. Behemoth rehabilitates awe. He stands in the reeds and teaches you what you forgot while scrolling. Much of reality towers over you, and that is not a threat when the Maker smile. Then Leviathan rises and the temperature drops. Can you snag him with a fishhook? Will he beg with soft words? Will he sign a lease for your courtyard? So tight are his scales that air is a rumor between them. Out of his mouth leap sparks, and the wake behind him glows like moonlit oil. Men who brag about spears grow suddenly interested in retirement. Lay a hand on him. Remember the battle. Do not do it again. Therefore, terror is honest. There are forces in this world we cannot program, seduce, buy, or litigate into calm. Leviathan is not offered to frighten Job into silence. He is offered to relocate Job's fear. The creature that makes empires tremble is to God a line item. Under the whole heaven it is mine, the sense runs. No one is fierce enough to rouse him, but I made him. I put the hook where hooks don't go. I set the leash you cannot see, therefore chaos is not king. It howls, it scorches, it breaks ships and headlines, but it does not rule. Your dread is real, your dread is not Lord. Modern translation: markets convulse. Ballots split families. A biopsy redraws the map of your future. An addiction tells you he'll sleep on your couch forever. The internet turns rumor into weaponized weather. That's Leviathan. Try a hook, he snorts. Draft a perfect comment, he grows. Pretend you aren't afraid, he smiles, but stand near the storm and listen to the voice. Leviathan is on a clock on a leash under a hand. Therefore you are free to do human things, repent, rest, act justly, love. Well, tell the truth without needing godlike results. Sanity returns when you trade control for trust. Frame break, name your Leviathan. Say it out loud. Markets, malignancy, media outrage, memories that hunt your sleep. Name it, therefore you can stop wrestling fog and start looking for the leash you cannot set, but God has already set. Do not pray for pets. Pray for perspective. Ask for the courage to live faithfully in a world where monsters exist and still do not own the map. We should say what the text does not. It does not turn evil into good by wordplay. Lightning that burned a field is not called blessing. A fallen roof is not called lesson. The point is not to euphemize harm. The point is to dethrone it. Behemoth says strength isn't sinful just because it scares you. Leviathan says terror isn't sovereign just because you tremble. Therefore, worship is no longer a bargain chip you play for protection. Worship becomes a posture you keep when protection fails. You bless the name because the name sits above the waters that drown other names. Some get stuck here arguing taxonomy. Hippo or sauropod, croc or chaos dragon. Have your fun. God's aim is not your museum label. It's your margin notes. He is calibrating Job's fear with creatures that make sense in any century, the unmanageable weight of nature and the ungovernable sting of chaos. The takeaway isn't which animal, it's which authority. If the God who loves you can point at everything that outscares you and say, "Mine," then the ash heap is not the whole address of your life. Practical liturgy for monster days. Inventory your illusions of control. I think my plan guarantees X. Therefore renounce the lie kindly. 2. Draft a small obedience, 1 honest call, 1 confession, 1 neighbor helped. Therefore act within your true size. 3. Seek proportion, 10 minutes under open sky, a psalm read aloud, a documentary that reminds you the world is older than your panic. 4. Speak your fear to God without edits, but end with a sentence of allegiance, not to outcomes, but to Him. These are not spells, they are sanity habits under a sovereign sky. By the end of the creature duet, nothing external has changed. Graves remain, skin still hums with ache. Friends still want a theory, but Job is shrinking his accusations and enlarging his adoration. The world is wild and not lawless, terrible and still tended. He can say soon and simply, "I had heard. Now I see." The seeing is not of reasons, it is of someone. Monsters exist and they are on his desk. The river still runs and Behemoth still shivers at dusk. Like a hill alive, and Leviathan still burns lines on the sea, and God still calls them by name without flinching. Therefore Job can breathe. Takeaway. Name your chaos, then trust the leash. Strength and storm are real, but they are not sovereign. Trade the fantasy of control for the practice of worship under a wiser hand. Stormlight thins to a clean, breathable sky. The ash still clings to Job's skin, but something in his chest has changed locations. He does not receive a spreadsheet. He receives sight. Small words come, the kind you can say with a throat scraped by sand, I had heard. Now I see. He retracts the lawsuit, therefore he stops demanding the minutes of heaven's meeting and asks instead for the mercy of presence. This is not an admission of a secret scandal. It is a surrender of a small frame. Pride wanted an audit. Awe wants a guide. God turns not to crush Job, but to correct the friends who mistook formulas for fidelity. You have not spoken of me what is right as my servant. Job has the sense runs, therefore they must bring offerings and Job must pray for them. Feel the reversal. The man in ashes becomes a priest again. The one they lectured must intercede so they can be forgiven. Grace drafts the wounded into the work of healing. Job prays and heaven answers acceptance, extended fellowship. Repaired a community reknit by the very hands grief tried to empty. Restoration arrives, but not as rewind. Fields replenish, flocks double, tents rise. Friends bring coins and comfort too late for yesterday, and just in time for tomorrow. Daughters are born and named like poetry, Jemima, Keziah, Keren, Hapuch. And they receive inheritance beside their brothers, a detail that whispers newness isn't only quantity, it is quality laced with justice. Therefore the book refuses to say suffering didn't matter. Graves don't undig, scars don't unform. But presence floods the rooms where absence once echoed, and joy learns to sing in a lower key that can hold sorrow without snapping. Notice the geometry of Job's repentance. He doesn't shrink into self-hatred, he expands into worship. He doesn't deny his pain, he dethrones his perspective. He doesn't finally figure out Behemoth and Leviathan, he trusts the one who laughs at their leashes. Therefore his words get smaller and truer. I spoke of things too wonderful, he admits. That sentence heals because it trades control for wonder grievance, for gratitude, interrogation for intimacy. Small words open a wide world. Frame break. What are your small words? I'm sorry, I trust you. Search me. Into your hands. Choose one sentence you can say on a hospital bed or in a quiet kitchen after the door clicks shut. Therefore, when your mind scrambles for control, your mouth will already know its work. And who needs your intercession? Which friend misread you and still deserves your prayer? You can keep receipts or you can keep relationships. You rarely keep both. Job blesses those who bruised him because blessing is how you keep your future from becoming a museum of old trials. Modern liturgy for leaving the ash heap without lying about it. And intercede, therefore, release, pray names of those who weaponize tidy truths. Ask good for them, not just change in them. By the final paragraph, the narrative breathes. Job lives long. He sees generations. He dies full of days, which is not code for pain-free, but a benediction over a life knit back together by hands that never once lost the thread. The question from our title returns like a friend. What if you lost everything by sunset? Who would you be then? The book of Job answers without flinching. You could be a worshiper who refuses despair's crown, a priest who prays for people who didn't deserve it, a human who walks forward without answers because presence is enough light for the next step. Therefore, let the credits roll over this: scars that do not shame you, awe that does not abandon you, and love that keeps choosing people over proofs. You do not need to win the case to find the judge kind. You do not need to leash Leviathan to live free. You need small words, a wide world, and a God who still speaks from storms and from kitchens. Start there. Begin again. Bless the name. Takeaway. Trade big explanations for small allegiance. Repent. By enlarging your view of God, pray for those who misread you. Rebuild with ordinary faithfulness. Restoration is not rewind, but relationship renewed under a wiser sky.